What is shaken, Internet? This is Salt bringing you the How to Tank for Dummies guide, Will of the Emperor, LFR. Will of the Emperor is the third and final boss in the second half of Mogu'Shan Vaults, which in LFR is called the Vault of Mysteries. He's also the final boss in the entire raid. As always, trash first. The trash is identical to the early trash before Elegon, so they'll stone you and freeze you in place. So be prepared to re-grab threat after coming out of it if it's not dispelled. Stand in the beams for the first pack to get healed. There's only a pack or two before you get to the boss's chambers, and I'll be skipping showing that in the video in the background to show you more of the boss. As for Will of the Emperor, there's only 3 things you need to worry about. First up, adds. This is the easiest thing to explain. At the beginning of the fight, several types of adds will spawn. Only the adds will spawn for the first minute or two of the fight, so you'll get a quick look at all of them before the boss actually shows up. There are 3 types of adds. First is the Emperor's Rage. These adds will come in sets of 2, and they'll always spawn in the middle of the semicircular wall of the room. Think 12 on a clock. These adds will fixate on random raid members and chase them down. You can't tank these, so they mean very little to you. DPS should burst them down to avoid casualties, but it is interesting to note that you can stun and snare these adds, so feel free to CC them if you get the option. Second is the Emperor's Strength. These adds spawn in the middle of each side of the room. Think 2 and 10 on a clock. They don't really do too much damage, but they will repeatedly smash the ground and stun everyone in a big circle in front of them. Whenever these spawn, one of the tanks should grab aggro on them and face them away from the raid. I believe that the circles actually increase in size the more times they do it. So that's one extra thing to worry about. But try to make sure that the DPS knows to kill these things as soon as they can, because they will stop you from moving, which is important for the next thing. Third is actually the Emperor's Courage. These are the opposite of the Rage adds and will fixate directly on tanks. They spawn at the far sides of the semicircle, 3 and 6 on a clock. And from what I've seen, they will always fixate on the tank that is farthest from them. Additionally, they cannot be damaged from the front at all, meaning DPS will have to kill them from behind. These guys, if they reach the tank, will do an attack that reduces your movement speed by a ton, causing a lot of problems with the next mechanic we'll discuss. Your rage should be handling all of the adds. Rages can be ignored as a tank since they just should be stunned and killed by the DPS. Strength should be taunted and faced away from the raid. When they do their stuns, just take a few steps towards them and hopefully you should be able to avoid the stun. The longer they stay up, the bigger those circles are going to get, and the less chance you are of going to be able to avoid them. You're not going to be able to avoid those stuns eventually, so get ready to, hopefully the DPS will burn them down. Courages can be ignored mostly, but if they get really close, you may want to start backing off. DPS will hopefully handle these as well. After a minute or two, the real bosses are going to show up. One on each side of the room. At I guess the 1 o'clock and the 11 o'clock. Janzi and Quinzi, I think is how you pronounce that. They're basically identical giant Mogu statues. These bosses have a shared health pool and really only have one ability besides their normal melee hits, Devastating Combo. Each boss should be tanked on opposite sides of the room. The tank should keep them separate and primarily facing away from the raid, but make sure to stay within range of the healers. The healers in range should be standing in the middle of the room, and tanks and melee should be on the sides. Devastating Combo is literally the only move the boss does, but it provides more than enough of a distraction. Every 20 seconds or so, both bosses will perform a Devastating Combo, performing 5 moves in succession that should be avoided. Both do the exact same moves in the exact same order, but the moves are determined randomly. There are 4 possible moves to watch for: Arc Right, Arc Left, Arc Center, and Stomp. Note that none of these will be announced to you or your raid unless you have something like Deadly Boss mods, and I've noticed that even with Deadly Boss mods, you have to actually be targeting the boss to get the raid warning. If you do not have the add-ons, the only way to tell what moves are coming up is to watch how the boss moves. When the boss arcs right, he's going to bring his weapon up to his left. When he arcs left, he'll bring it to his right. When he arcs center, he'll raise it over his head and raise his leg a little bit, and when he stomps, he'll just lift up his leg and keep his weapon down. The center arc seems to be slightly longer than the others, and stomp seems a bit shorter, but not by much. There's no real way to explain this without you going and trying it out. You have to run right when he arcs right. As a tank, you run right because he's going to face you. So, example, he arcs right, you run right. He arcs left, you run left. When he arcs center, you run behind him. And when he stomps, you have to get away from him. The stomp is the only one that's extra tricky, since the boss will actually mark the tanks with magnetic armor, meaning that if you're over 15 yards away from him, he'll pull you to him immediately. It takes a lot of attempts to really get used to the arcs, but once you are, you should have a relatively easy time of avoiding at least most of them. Personally, the center arc is the hardest for me to avoid because it seems to be the biggest arc. But tanks do have it slightly easier, as every time after the boss finishes one move, if he arcs right, he finishes that move, he will reface to the tank. So if he faces to you, then you can move left, allowing you to always know exactly where the boss will be facing for each strike. This is going to be very important for like the center and the right and the left. Like I did say, the stomp actually does a stomp and stuns you within 10 yards of the boss. So if you're 10 yards away from the boss, or less, you will get stunned by stomp. However, like I said, if magnetic armor's on you, which it should be as a tank, you will be pulled in over 15 yards away. So you have a very sweet spot of between 10 yards and 15 yards that you have to stand in and not get hit by the stomp. Otherwise, you'll get pulled in or get hit by the stomp, so it's a very tiny window you got there. The point of avoiding these devastating combos is actually twofold. The damage the strikes do themselves isn't terribly high, but each strike that hits you will reduce your armor by 10%. This can stack up to 5 for every devastating combo, and really do damage to your survivability, so you want to avoid as many strikes as possible. In addition, if you successfully avoid all 5 strikes in a devastating combo, you get a bonus action button that does a massive chunk of damage to the boss, I think around 500,000 damage. Nice, 500,000 damage instantly. Since it's the only mechanic the boss does, you'll get lots of practice in it, and it'll come in time. The adds will continue to spawn throughout the fight, around every 15 seconds or so, with a new wave. To sum up the fight so far, you need to avoid the devastating combos, tank the bosses apart, and taunt over the strength adds if they come close to you, avoiding their circle stun. Otherwise, just watch out for courage as getting close to you. Obviously, mobility is key in the fight, which is why the adds mostly just stun or slow you, which will lead to more devastating combo hits, which will lead to your eventual death. If you can avoid devastating combo when the fight becomes fairly easy to tank, or if you can avoid the devastating combo, then the fight becomes very easy to tank, as the damage is completely controllable without the armor debuff. There is a third mechanic to discuss briefly. Every so often the room will fill with gas. This gas has a few properties. It increases the damage you do, which is good, but it also increases the damage the bosses do, which is bad. Additionally, it will periodically damage the whole raid over time. The saving grace here is that the adds will stop spawning while the gas is out, letting you focus on just avoiding the combos. This is when you want to keep your cooldowns most active thanks to the increase in damage output from the boss. There aren't any additional phases or anything, and it doesn't get any more complicated as the fight goes on. There's no enrage mechanic that I know of, so once you get the hang of it, it should be very easy to accomplish. The fight will take a long time most likely because people will not avoid all the combos and get that bonus action button to help to finish off the boss faster. But as long as you keep avoiding as much as you can and the DPS can keep the adds under control, there shouldn't be any problems for this fight. There are no real differences between LFR and normal, besides the fact that devastating combo hurts a lot more. As for tanking strategies though, they're exactly the same. You should avoid combos, you should grab strengths, you should avoid stuns and sningers. Hopefully your raid group can handle the combos too. If not, tell them to practice in LFR more. So that's really what you want to do. You want to practice in LFR to avoid those devastating combos, and it's going to be very important to announce. You know, somebody might announce what's going on or where's going on. I like to put a marker on myself. I'm the star. That way I can put a star on myself and everybody knows where I'm standing at the beginning of each strike so that everybody knows where the boss is going to face. I hope you enjoyed this guide for dummies. Please like, favorite, subscribe, all that jazz. And as always, you keep it salty, Internet.